Hey, welcome back. This is part 2 of our 8-part deep dive into consciousness. Last time, we kind of set the stage. Today, we're getting into the really thorny question, why is this so incredibly hard to figure out?
Really think about that for a second. We've accomplished these just monumental scientific feats. We've mapped the billions of connections in the human brain. We've decoded the entire human genome. And yet the one thing that's with us every single second of our lives, our own awareness, is still pretty much a black box. So why is that?
Okay, so let's get into it. The first huge problem is that the study of consciousness is completely fragmented. You see, it's not one big project. It's more like a bunch of different teams, all staring at a giant puzzle, but they're all in separate rooms. They have different tools, they speak different languages, they're not working together.
So, in the first room, you've got the neuroscientists. You can think of them as the electricians. Their job is to map out the physical hardware of the brain, all the neurons, the synapses, the electrical pulses zipping around.
And what's fascinating is that neuroscience is amazing at telling us the what and the when. It can show you a brain scan and say, see that? That's the part of your brain that lights up when you see the color red. But it has absolutely no answer for how a bunch of electrical signals and chemicals creates the actual feeling, the subjective experience of redness. That right there is the famous hard problem of consciousness.
All right, let's go to the next room. Here we have the psychologists. Now, they're not looking at the wiring, they're looking at the software. They study our behaviors, our thoughts, our emotions, all to try and figure out the patterns of the mind.
And don't get me wrong, psychology gives us these fantastic models for understanding how we think and act, but here's the issue. A lot of these models are pretty abstract. They give us a great blueprint for the software, but they often don't explain how that software is actually running on the physical hardware of the brain. That connection is often missing. Now for our third group, the philosophers. They're taking a totally different approach. They're not focused on the brain or behavior, but on the experience itself, that what it's like feeling of being you. They're the ones who give us the language to even talk about this stuff with any kind of precision.
So, the crucial thing here is that philosophy gives us the vocabulary. It helps us describe our inner worlds. But, and this is a big but, it's not science in the traditional sense. You can't really test a philosophical argument in a lab, right? And that makes it really, really hard to connect with what the neuroscientists and psychologists are going.
And finally, there's a perspective that's been around for thousands of years, but that science is, well, mostly ignored. And that's the wisdom from contemplative and spiritual traditions. For millennia, they've been working with ideas like vibration and frequency, using tools like meditation to directly work with consciousness. Think about it. For centuries, practices like chanting or deep breathing have been used to change someone's state of mind. And for a long time, this was dismissed. But now, science is actually starting to catch up. We're exploring things like rhythmic entrainment and seeing how these ancient techniques have very real, measurable effects on our brainwaves. It seems like they were onto something all along. And this table just lays it all out perfectly, doesn't it? We've got these 4 different camps. Neuroscience has the wiring, psychology has the patterns, philosophy has the experience, and spirituality has the energetics. They each have a piece of the puzzle, but as you can see, they're all missing the same thing, a single unifying theory that actually connects all the dots.
But you know what? The problem is even deeper than just these separate fields not talking to each other. The issue might go all the way down to the very foundations of how we think. The basic assumptions we're using to study consciousness. They might be wrong from the start.
Okay, so here's flaw number 1. Most of our scientific models are built on the idea of the brain as a computer. It takes in data, processes it in discrete little bits, zeros and ones. But just ask yourself, is that what your inner life feels like? A sequence of data points? No way. Our experience is a constant, dynamic, messy, beautiful flow. It's much more like a river than a computer.
Which brings us to a second huge blind spot, frequency and resonance. And like this quote says, this isn't some new age idea, it's ancient wisdom. Cultures all over the world knew that sound and rhythm weren't just for fun. They were technologies for tuning your inner state, for physically changing how your brain and body operate.
And the third major flaw is a problem of scale. We tend to focus on things that happen in our brain from second to second. We understand daily circadian rhythm, sure, but we pretty much ignore the bigger, slower cycles, like the lunar cycle. We know it has a massive gravitational effect on our planet's oceans. Is it really a stretch to think it might have a subtle effect on us too?
Now you might be thinking, come on, the moon's effect has got to be tiny. And day to day, maybe it is. But what happens when you zoom out?
What seems like a tiny little nudge could become a massive shaping force over the course of an entire lifetime, or even over millions of years of evolution. It's like trying to understand a canyon by looking at one grain of sand. You're missing the big picture.
So when you put all of this together, the isolated disciplines, the bad assumption about information, the blind spots for frequency and scale, you start to see the real problem with how we're trying to study this.
And here it is, the core issue. Our scientific method is incredible at taking things apart and analyzing them when they're sitting still. We can analyze a static object, but consciousness isn't an object. It's a process. It's a dynamic flow.
And this is really the best way to think about it. Right now, all our scientific methods are basically just taking snapshots of a flowing river. And we can analyze each snapshot in incredible detail. We can describe the molecules, the currents, the riverbed, but we are completely, utterly missing the most essential quality of the river, the fact that it flows.
So that leaves us with this really exciting question. What if the problem isn't that consciousness is unexplainable? What if the problem is just that our tools are wrong for the job? What if we need a whole new kind of science, a framework designed from the ground up to describe things that are fluid, interconnected, and constantly in motion? And that's exactly where we're headed next time.
If you want to get a head start and really go deep on this, the full framework, all the experiments, and the extensions are detailed in the paper we've linked for you below. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.